The door opened at 9:57 in the morning, and nobody looked up. That was a thing Emily Carter would never forget. Not the mistake itself, but the casualness of it. The way the most important moment of her life arrived without a soundtrack, without a warning, without any of the cinematic weight it deserved. Just a door opening, just a man walking in, just a room full of prepared, polished, expensive people who glanced up for half a second and then looked back down at their phones and their documents and their coffee cups. Because nothing about the man who had just entered suggested he was worth more than half a second of anyone's attention. He was holding a paper cup from the deli on the corner of 42nd and Lexington, the kind with the blue Greek border printed around the outside, the kind that cost $2.25 and came with a plastic lid that never quite sealed properly. He wore a navy jacket that had been pressed but not recently, worn leather boots, the kind that had been resoled at least once because someone had decided they were worth keeping rather than replacing. No tie, no watch catching the morning light, no assistant trailing behind him with a leather briefcase. He looked like a man who had taken a wrong turn somewhere between the elevator and wherever he was actually supposed to be. He looked, to every person in that boardroom, like someone who did not belong. Emily was standing near the window when he walked in. She had been running through the opening of her presentation one final time in her mind, the words she had rewritten 4 times over 6 weeks, the words that were supposed to say 437 jobs and her father's legacy, and the company that had been built on 31 years of stubborn, unglamorous belief. She had not slept more than 4 hours in 2 nights. She had not eaten breakfast. She had been standing at that window since 7:15, watching the city wake up below her, thinking about her father and what he would say if he could see her now. Thomas Carter had built Carter Innovations in a garage in Ohio with 2 employees and a second mortgage and a rusted truck that overheated twice on the highway to his first client meeting. He had soldered circuit boards past midnight and driven home singing to keep himself awake. He had believed, with the kind of faith that looks like stubbornness from the outside and feels like oxygen from the inside, that technology could make ordinary people's lives genuinely better if someone cared enough to build it right. And 31 years later, 437 people came to work every morning because he had been right. Thomas had been gone for 2 years now, and for 3 months, his company had been dying. Emily had restructured, she had cut costs and held emergency meetings and looked her department heads in the eyes and told them they were going to be fine. Even on the mornings the words felt like a lie she was telling herself as much as them. She had done everything a person could do. And then she heard a name, Michael Bennett. Not the kind of billionaire who appeared on magazine covers, the kind who showed up quietly, looked at something everyone else had written off, and decided it was worth believing in. When Bennett invested, others followed. His name was not a name, it was a resurrection. She had spent 6 weeks preparing for this meeting, every projection rebuilt, every document reviewed 3 times, every executive rehearsed. She had personally rewritten the company narrative 4 times, looking for the version that captured not just the numbers, but the soul of what her father had built. She was ready. They were all ready. And then the door opened at 9:57, and a man with a paper coffee cup had walked in, and Emily Carter had looked at him for approximately 2 seconds. 2 seconds. She would spend years thinking about those 2 seconds. Her younger associate had reached him first. "Sir, can I help you?" The man had smiled, patient, unhurried. "I'm here for the 10 o'clock meeting." The associate had frowned at his lack of visitor badge and told him he would need to check in downstairs. And Emily, from across the room, had added her voice to the verdict without a moment's hesitation. "This meeting is private. If you're supposed to be here, someone will come find you." The man had looked at her then, directly. His eyes were a quiet, steady gray. And in them, if she had been paying any attention at all, she might have seen something that was not anger and not humiliation, but something far more unsettling: recognition. The calm, weathered recognition of a man who had stood in this exact moment before and already knew how it ended. "Understood," he said simply, and the door closed behind him with a sound so small and so final that nobody in the room thought about it again. The presentation began. The numbers were strong. The product demonstration ran without a single error. Emily spoke with the controlled passion of someone who had memorized every word and still managed to mean it. Her team was flawless. and they waited for Michael Bennett. 9 minutes passed. 18. 31. Emily refilled her coffee. She kept her faith composed. She exchanged a look with her CFO that lasted less than a second and communicated everything neither of them would say out loud. The lawyers had stopped pretending to review documents. The executives had stopped whispering. The room had taken on the particular, suffocating silence of people waiting for news they were beginning to suspect would not be good. 53 minutes after the boardroom door had clicked shut behind the man with the paper cup, Emily's assistant appeared in the doorway. She walked directly to Emily and held out her phone without saying a word. Her hand was trembling slightly. Emily took the phone and looked at the screen and read 4 sentences that she would be able to recite word for the rest of her life. Michael Bennett was withdrawing from all investment discussions. Effective immediately. No future meetings, no further negotiations. The decision was final. "Find me a photograph," Emily said. Her voice was perfectly steady. Her hands were ice cold. The image appeared on the boardroom screen 10 seconds later. And there he was. The same gray eyes, the same navy jacket, the same worn leather boots, the same paper coffee cup held in one hand outside a building in Brooklyn. A small girl of perhaps 8 or 9 years old standing beside him with her hand tucked into his, looking up at him with the particular trust that children reserve only for the people who have never once let them go. Nobody in the boardroom spoke. Nobody moved. The silence was the loudest thing Emily Carter had ever heard in her life. She thought about his eyes, that quiet, steady gray, that recognition. She thought about the word understood and the way he had said it without bitterness, without performance. The way a man says a word when he has already accepted something and is simply closing a door gently on his way out. She thought about the little girl in the photograph, her hand tucked into her father's, and she felt something crack open inside her chest that no amount of professional composure could hold together. She went home that night and sat in her father's chair in the dark for a very long time. She thought about Thomas Carter, who had known the name of every janitor in every building where he'd ever held a meeting, who had arrived early to shake the security guard's hand before the CEO's, who once pulled over on the highway to help a stranger with a flat tire and arrived 40 minutes late to a meeting that could have ended his career, and when asked why, had said simply, "Because he needed help, and I was there." She thought about the evening she was 17 and had been short with a waitress, and how her father had waited until they were in the car to say, quietly and without anger, "The way you treat someone who can do nothing for you is the only honest thing about you." She had forgotten that. Somewhere between the corner office and the 53rd floor and the weight of 437 people depending on her not to fail, she had forgotten the most important thing her father had ever said. In the days that followed, she learned about Michael Bennett the way you learn about someone after you have already made your irreversible mistake. Slowly, painfully, piece by piece. She learned that he had lost his wife when their daughter was 3 years old. A Tuesday morning in November, an ordinary drive to the grocery store, and then a phone call that split his life permanently into before and after. She learned that he had raised his daughter alone, that her name was Grace, that he brought her with him on Saturday mornings to the Brooklyn Literacy Center, where he volunteered without cameras or coverage or any acknowledgement whatsoever. She learned that he had grown up with almost nothing, that his own father had worked 2 jobs and still struggled, that he had built everything he had by remembering every single day what it felt like to be the person in the room that no one looked at twice. She drove to Brooklyn on a Saturday morning 3 weeks later. No assistants, no prepared remarks, no lawyers waiting in a car outside. She wore a plain coat and took the subway for the first time in the 4 years and stood outside the Literacy Center for a full minute before she walked in because her hands were shaking and she needed them to stop. The room was warm and bright and smelled like paper and juice boxes and the irreplaceable sweetness of a place where children felt safe. Kids chased each other between the tables. Parents gathered coats and backpacks. A woman was wiping down a whiteboard in the corner, humming quietly to herself. And at the back of the room, stacking folding chairs with the practice efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times, was Michael Bennett. Beside him, carefully placing paper cups into a recycling bin one by one, was a small girl with dark braids and her father's gray eyes. Grace. Emily stopped walking. She watched them for a moment, the way Michael handed his daughter each cup without being asked, the way Grace accepted each one with the small, serious focus of a child who understood she was helping with something that mattered. The easy, wordless communication between a father and a child who had learned to be a team because there was no one else. The way he glanced down at her every few seconds, not checking, just looking. The way parents look at children they have almost lost and found again, and cannot quite stop needing to see. Emily felt tears arrive before she had decided to cry. Michael saw her when she was still 10 feet away. He straightened. He didn't smile and he didn't frown. He simply looked at her with those steady gray eyes and waited.
"I'm sorry," Emily said. The words felt like almost nothing, like arriving at a fire with a glass of water. But they were honest, and honest was all she had brought with her. Michael was quiet for a moment. Grace looked up at Emily with the open, uncomplicated curiosity of a child, then looked back at her father, reading his face the way children read the faces of the people they depend on. "I know," Michael said finally. "I looked at you for 2 seconds," Emily said. "I didn't ask your name, I didn't say good morning. I looked at your jacket and your boots and your coffee cup, and I decided you didn't belong in my boardroom." She paused. Her voice was steady, but only barely. "My father would have been ashamed of me." Something shifted in Michael's expression. Just slightly. Just enough. "Tell me about your father," he said. And so she did. Standing in the back of a Brooklyn community room while children played and a woman hummed, and Grace Bennett quietly finished putting away the paper cups, Emily Carter talked about Thomas Carter for the first time since his funeral, about the garage in Ohio, about the rusted truck, about the janitors and the security guards and the flat tire on the highway, about the waitress and the car and the only honest thing about you. She talked until her voice went rough and she had to stop. And when she stopped, the room was very quiet. Michael picked up the last chair and set it in place. He looked at his daughter, who had moved to sit at a nearby table and was drawing something with a crayon, her tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth in concentration. "Her mother died when she was 3, he said quietly, not asking for sympathy, just telling the truth, the way he seemed to do everything. I tell her that her mother noticed people, that she remembered names, that she never once walked into a room and decided someone didn't belong there." He looked back at Emily. "That's the inheritance I'm trying to give her. Not money, that." Emily couldn't speak for a moment. "She's lucky," she finally said, "to have someone who knows what matters." Michael looked at her steadily. "So were you. Don't waste it." The investment never came back. Emily had known before she walked into that community room that it wouldn't, and she had come anyway because some things are worth doing even when there is nothing left to gain from doing them. Some apologies exist only to return you to yourself. Carter Innovations found its way forward through harder, slower work, through relationships rebuilt on honesty, through trust earned back one conversation at a time, through a CEO who started arriving early to say good morning to the receptionist and stayed late to learn. The name of the man who cleaned the offices on the 14th floor. 437 people kept their jobs. Not because a billionaire wrote a check, because a woman drove to Brooklyn on a Saturday morning and remembered who her father had raised her to be. Years later, a television interviewer asked Michael Bennett what he looked for most when deciding whether to invest in a company. He thought about it for a long moment, the way he always did before saying something he meant entirely. "I can teach almost anyone to build a business," he said quietly. "Strategy, systems, risk. All of it can be learned." He paused. "But I have never once been able to teach a person how to see the value in another human being. Either they know it when they walk in, or they don't." In her office in Manhattan, Emily Carter watched that interview alone. She smiled. Not the boardroom smile, the quiet one, the one that lived deeper than strategy, the one that remembered a man with a paper coffee cup and worn leather boots and gray eyes full of a patience she had not deserved and could not repay. She thought about Grace Bennett, drawing with a crayon at a table in Brooklyn, inheriting something more valuable than any fortune. She thought about her father in his garage in Ohio, soldering circuit boards past midnight, knowing the names of everyone around him. She thought about a door opening at 9:57 in the morning and a man walking in, and 2 seconds that had cost her everything and taught her more than everything. And she understood finally and fully the truth that both of them had always known. The most powerful thing you will ever bring into any room is not your title, not your money, not your preparation, not your reputation. It is the simple, irreversible decision to look at the person in front of you, whoever they are, whatever they are carrying, however ordinary they appear, and treat them as though they matter. Because they do. Because they always have. Because sometimes the person who can change the entire direction of your life will walk through your door holding nothing more than a paper cup of coffee. And the only question that will ever truly count is whether in the 2 seconds you had, you chose to see them. If this story moves something in you today, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that every person deserves to be seen. Subscribe to the Kind Soul Stories, where every week we bring you stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Stories about ordinary people who chose kindness when no one was watching and changed everything because of it. Leave a comment below and tell us about someone in your life who taught you to truly see people. We would love to hear from you. This story teaches one of the most important and difficult human lessons, that unconscious judgment happens in seconds, costs enormously, and can only be repaired through genuine humility. It honors single parents who raise children alone with grace and intention. It preserves the wisdom of the greatest generation through Thomas Carter's memory, reminding older American viewers of values they were raised with and may fear are disappearing. It models authentic accountability. Emily does not make excuses or bargain. She simply shows up. It also shows that redemption is not always about recovering what was lost, but about recovering who you were always meant to be. For older American audiences who value loyalty, dignity, quiet heroism, and the kind of character that holds even when no one is watching, this story speaks directly to the deepest things they believe in.